Hello there, I'm Squire Callahan Ridgeborn, almost a battle master, definitely a wizard, and tonight I am joined by Milk, the Paragon Bard. Milk, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Sweet. Milk, how long have you been playing Amtgard for?
That's a long and complicated question, but my first Amtgard experience was about 1999. I played from then to about 04. Leveled healer first, leveled bard second in V6, and then I took a break from 04 to 2012, and then jumped back in, and have been playing pretty continuously since 2012.
Wow, okay. So how many versions have you seen then?
Technically, I started with V6, but
okay.
I played a lot of V6, loved it, it was great, it was wonderful. About the time V7 was coming out is when I started taking a break, and I jumped back in. It was still technically, I think, 7.7, but 8 was finishing up playtesting, so the parks that I played at played V8 heavily, so I really skipped most of 7 and played 6 and 8, but I have played some 7 here and there.
Okay, cool. So how long have you been playing Bard for?
So Bard was the second class I leveled. I leveled Healer first in V6, I leveled Bard in V6, and I leveled Wizard in V6. And then I brought forward into V8. I wanted to finish the caster classes, so when I came back in 2012, I finished out Druid. And when COVID hit, I played Druid for a long time, and then COVID hit, and when I started going back out after COVID, and started, opening up a little bit, I wanted a class I could take a sash and not have to necessarily worry about equipment on game days when it might be muddy or there might not be a lot of people out for COVID or anything like that. I could just take a sash and go play, and that's when I switched to Bard.
Okay, cool. Can you walk us through your Paragon journey? How long did you play Bard before you got your Paragon, real seriously? What did that look like for you?
Really, it took about... I guess coming back from COVID in 21, 22, up to getting it in Bridge Wars 23, I think.
Okay.
So about 2 years really playing it, and really is just playing it and finding my niche as a bard.
Cool. Sweet. What does your training regiment look like? What do you do to try to be your best self on the battlefield?
For Bard and for casters in general, it's really about knowing your incants and being able to spout them off cleanly and clearly. Everybody talks about, practicing your incants, make sure you know them backwards and forwards and things like that. But what I've found is there's a little bit more to it than that. If you're just sitting at a desk practicing your incants, that's important. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's very different from when you get out onto a battlefield and you're not focused on your incant. You're focused on all the threats that are coming at you. So for me, I started practicing very slowly. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Yep.
So start very slowly and start while you're doing other things with your hands, with your eyes, things that don't necessarily require a lot of attention, but I wouldn't do it while you're doing brain surgery or anything like that. But while you're driving down the road, instead of listening to music, roll through your incants, roll through your top 5 and things like that. Know them backwards and forwards.
Cool. So when you're playing Bard, what kind of fighter are you? Where are you on the battlefield? What are you doing?
That is a question with many different answers, and it has to do with the game type, what the objectives are, what the team composition is, whether it's a chapter game here at Stormbridge or it's a kingdom game that is, a little bit higher stakes, maybe like Bridge Wars or something like that. But usually you'll find me somewhere in the midline, either with some support or with some CC, with some crowd control.
Yeah. Okay. So when you are playing that midline bard, are you the kind of bard that buys armor and equipment, or do you spend most of your points on spells?
I will end up spending most of my points on spells. Like I said, I came into it back from COVID just hoping I could take a sash out and point at people and make things happen. So I tend to favor mostly taking spells and abilities, but I will usually take sword and board if I might have to fill in a front line or chase somebody off an objective with a sword and board.
Okay.
I don't usually take armor. I've never been a fan of wearing the armor and things like that for any class. That's why I don't generally play martial classes and things like that.
Okay. What do you think the minimum gear to successfully play Bard would look like?
It's a sash. It's absolutely... You can play a perfectly wonderful, useful Bard with just a sash with no problems. There is nothing wrong with finger gun Bard. Knowing your incants, knowing when to use shove versus when to use tear versus when to use the 900 command school options, you can absolutely be successful with just a sash.
Okay. Yeah, I have a quick follow-up to that. I have been looking a lot at spell lists lately and spell availability across the game. And something I noticed is I don't think that Bard gets any spell that's naturally rechargeable. They get their songs, which are mostly unlimited, and then Song of Survival, I believe, is the one that has to be recharged.
Yeah.
So they don't get a first-level rechargeable or unlimited spell like all the other casters do.
I believe you're right. And I hadn't really thought about it like that because I don't actively, as a bard, I'm not normally the one who is doing the charging in that regard, so I never really thought about it like that, but I suppose that's probably true. I'd have to go look to confirm that, but I'll take your word for it.
Okay. So my follow-up question is, if you were to try to play weaponless bard, how do you maintain the spell list without running out of things? Do you lean heavily into the per lives? Because it doesn't look like there's a ton of refresh things for Bard. What, at least at the lower levels, what are you doing to make that work?
I really do. I lean into the per lives. The per refreshes I lean more towards terror, occasionally some break con, depending on what else is going on. In a smaller game that's maybe 8-on-8 or less, I will just lean absolutely into greater release, even though it's per refresh. Combine that with Dervish, and you're talking about 8, 10, 12, 16 greater releases, which will last you easily a game at 5-on-5, 6-on-6, but can cut it close when you hit those 8-on-8s and 10-on-10s at a chapter level. At Kingdom level, I couldn't do that, but you can make a game of it for sport at a park level, at a chapter level. But then after that, you do have to lean into your per lives, awe, shove, insult, those sorts of things.
Okay. So in the most recent rules update playtest part that we're doing, they changed break concentration from being per refresh to per life. How do you feel about that? What's that make you feel about? Are you going to alter your kit at all for your basic build there?
Yeah, you almost have to. The break con being per life is too good to pass up at that point. I did not run break con that often in any serious numbers. I had a couple for an emergency on some lists, depending on what else was going on, what I was facing on the opposing team. But now I can just run break cons for days. It's so, between that and Dervish, you drop 2 points into it with Dervish, and then 2 points into break con. Now you've got 4 per life, and you're one of the best silencers on the field at that point.
Absolutely. And that, I'm a little bit interested to see what that's going to look like coming up at March event, because we've got a couple of bards that are already using BreakCon when they were per refresh. I feel like we're going to see a lot more suppression happening out on the field.
Dervish and Legend combined with 4 extensions per life. I'm going to break con you, then I'm going to extension break con you if I need to, and really, because it's one line, it's a short incant. I can hit you and 6 other casters before people really realize what's going to happen. So practice your BreakCon incants, kids.
Okay. So for Bard with Look the Part, how do you get looked apart as a bard, and how do you really stand out from the crowd of random people milling around looking like normal casters?
I probably have a different take than most, but I am not big on necessarily looking like the bardiest bard of all bards. I don't, wear music notes and things like that of my ANS repertoire. Not that there's much. I'm very low level in dragons and things like that. So I do a little bit of poetry, but that's hard to necessarily represent in garb the same way you could with a musical note easily. But I am a big fan of, I don't get to tell you what your wizard looks like. You don't get to tell me what my bard looks like. As long as we're appropriately garbed and more than minimum, I'm happy to give anybody look the part and say that, yep, that's what your bard looks like, that's what your wizard looks like, that's what your whatever class looks like. The only time I want something a little bit more than that is if we're talking about monsters. I should be able to tell that's a monster and reasonably what kind of monster that is. But other than that, your bard is your bard, and however your bard looks is how your bard looks, and here's your look the part for it, as long as you're meeting or exceeding the bare minimum of, a tunic and a sash.
Okay. Is there any part of bard that you think is useless, like it doesn't work, for you or in general?
No, not really. There's nothing bad on bard. There's nothing that's untakeably bad on bard. There are some things that vary according to play style and player and all those sorts of things. But overall, there's nothing that's untakeably bad. They're the least of Bard right now with the update to BreakCon. If that goes through, if that stays, then probably Discordia is probably the weakest. And it's not bad. It's just kind of will fall out of favor because BreakCon will be so prevalent being per life rather than Discordia, 1 per refresh.
What does Discordia do?
That's the one that gives you the enchantments that gives you multiple BreakCons out of, I think it's 5 BreakCons on strips.
Oh, okay.
You move a strip and you BreakCon somebody.
Gotcha. Okay. I think I've seen that in use, but I didn't know what its name was because
most bards I don't think run it very often. It's great as a kind of a gimmicky surprise, but you can't rely on it because it's limited to 1, so you're going to have it for 1 life. But it's not bad. Probably the other things would be like a long weapon, and that's just play style. If you use long weapons, that would be a perfectly fine take.
Okay. Shifting gears a little bit and looking at battle games, what does your default battle game spell list look like? What do you bring into, let's say, a generic Kingdom Field? Not quite Bridge Wars, but not a normal park day. It's one of those June events at Billy Creek. What do you bring into the field there?
As much as we talk about command being a little bit more prevalent of an immunity between enchantments and monks and all of the ways to get command immunity now, I still love awe. Awe is still a very powerful, useful spell for me, so it's almost always a staple of my list. Probably rely on it a little more than I should. But I like Dervish, I like Combat Caster, I like Song of Deflection is always on the list, especially now that it more closely resembles projectiles rather than just warding off the damage of a projectile. The full effect, it makes Song of Deflection even more staple. And then a short weapon and a medium shield is usually where I'll go. I like to have a little bit of defense. I carry a max medium shield, so having that little bit extra passive defense when I'm not necessarily watching and paying attention as I'm working to release or mend or keep an eye out to what the other teams are doing and things like that. So those are the staples. And then after that, I build around whatever I'm going to see on the team. A little bit more terror if I see a little bit more barbarian, a little bit less terror if I see a little bit more paladin, something like that.
Okay. I did want to ask you about command immunity, because right now we've got 3 melee classes that are fully command immunied. It feels like druids always have command immunity because they always are doing their lycanthropy thing. Mm-hmm. And paladin gives out command immunity, so we've got a lot of command immunity going on. Do you think that's hurt bard as a class? Do you think that we're going to see a balance to that coming out?
Technically, yes, it probably has hurt bard, but bards are such a high-tier class that it's okay. Bard does not need buffed or rebalanced because of it. Bard is in a great place, and like all casters, could be nerfed a little bit. We've got some power creeping up, and I acknowledge that. This is the largest conversation we might have where we might admit it outside of the rules reps and things, but casters are powerful. They need a little bit of nerf. Power creep's coming along.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's necessarily, yes, is there more command immunity? Sure. Is it affecting Bard? Yes. Is it to a serious detriment? No. Bard is still a perfectly valid, perfectly good, great, top tier, high tier class, so I don't think there's any worry about Bard going anywhere anytime soon.
Okay. What will make you deviate from that spell list? Is there anything that would make you really step back to the starting space on the spell list?
There are several things I look at. What does the other team's command immunity look like? If it's a ton of druids and paladins and monks over there, then yeah, I'm probably going to reel that back in. If it's not, then yeah, I'm going to spread that out. I'm going to give everybody smalls. But some other things I look at are who the other players are. If it's somebody I know and I have an idea of what their sorts of reactions to whatever I'm doing might be. Some people are naturally more aggressive and know to rush the caster at certain times, and some people naturally, as soon as you start speaking at them, they'll back off. So everything you cast is at least a shove.
Right.
So it really depends on what I'm seeing across the way. It also depends on the game objective. If whatever the objective is do something in the middle and then run it to the opposing team, I know I've got to be a little bit in terms of point control. I've got to control this space either in a defensive area or to get to whatever the middle objective is. But if it's an objective where they've got to pick something up or do something in the middle and go back to their base or come back to our base, then aw's not going to help with that nearly as much. I can awe them back to their base, but that's kind of where they want to go.
Right.
So I got to be careful in those selections. Shove is in the same boat. Make sure I got to line those up to get them away from things. So after that, we're looking at agoraphobias for a little bit more to keep people away from each other and things like that.
Okay. What do you think the best single ability that Bard gets is?
The best single ability? Ooh, that's a good question. Let me think about that for a minute. Awe is a personal favorite, but with BreakCon becoming per life, that might have moved to the top of the list. It is such a game changer in that moment. It really ruins whatever's about to happen. Dropping BreakCon on a healer that's in the process of healing or rezzing, it's like counterspelling in D&D. Why are you counterspelling a healing word? Because you're counterspelling a healing word.
Right.
It's such a powerful thing, and to have that now per life, that probably is moving up, but it would be between that and Song of Deflection. Song of Deflection is so good, so handy, especially now that it's moved up and has become a full-on pro-projectile-esque ability. To be unlimited, to be, several times per life, and I can switch in and switch out and do whatever. Song of Deflection is probably the one that is the most useful song. So it'd probably be between BreakCon and Song of Deflection is the best.
Okay. What is the worst single ability that Bard has?
Small shield or long weapon. most of the time as a bard, I don't take a small shield. If I'm going to take a shield, I want the full-size medium. There are times where you do want the little bit more maneuverability of a small shield. Long weapons, you're only getting an extra foot, and you're spending higher level points. Just not worth it to me. That being said, mentioned earlier, if Bracon stays per life long term, then Discordia is probably going to move to the bottom spot. But again, it's not untakeable. It'd just be less takeable, less common.
Okay. So, when you are playing Bard, how do I defeat you if I'm playing a rival caster? How can I mess with your game plan there?
It depends on what you're sporting. It's hard to beat a bard. It's hard to beat a bard. They have so many different weapons at their disposal, similar to the way a druid has many different weapons, but I'd say even more so in the moment. If I'm playing, sword and board bard, and you're coming at me, now I can break on you as a caster. And now I'm going to chase you down with sword and board, because most casters that are opposing me, if they're casters, aren't equipped to handle sword and board coming at them without spouting off a verbal and not being silenced and things like that. If they're a spellball caster, now we're talking about things like Song of Freedom and Song of Determination, or whatever I see coming up. If you got a nice ball in your hand, then yeah, I'm switching over to Song of Freedom, and we're playing a chess game and going back and forth.
Right.
The difference is my song dancing takes one line, whereas your verbals will take 3 lines, or to get your next spellball charge, your better spellball charge takes 3 lines maybe. Obviously, if you're an elemental barrage, it's a different ball game, and you really just have to evaluate on a case-by-case basis. If it's a druid with a polearm, now we're talking about some different things and looking at shoves and awes, and okay, Lycan's up, so we've got to move on to something else, and whatever that might be, focus on shoves and things like that.
Okay. Same question, but for melee. How can I defeat you if I'm a melee fighter?
If you're not a monk, you can't. Like, it's not that you can't, but it's so hard to go up against a bard as a melee fighter, because awe is going to keep you away from me. Terror is going to keep you away from me. I like to think about it. I might not be able to win, but you're not going to win. I'm going to keep you off of this ground. I'm going to keep you out of this point. I'm going to, control this node so that my team can have it. I'm going to keep you away from the flag and things like that. I might not be able to kill you, but you're not going to kill me either. And that's really how I work with Bard, how I think about Bard. So melee is one of the more difficult ones. Monks are the only thing a bard doesn't have a great answer for. If a monk comes in, there's no amount of awe or shove or anything. I just have to rely on my stick beating their stick, being as good with their stick. Mine is not. I am not a stick at all. So most of the time when the monk comes bearing down on me, I hightail it over to the other side of the field, find a fighter that can go handle that, and absolutely make the team work, do teamwork, and hey, go kill that guy for me.
Okay. How vulnerable are bards to archery?
They used to be a little bit, and in terms of non-archer bow use, not very much, hardly any more. Scouts are always a threat because they can do so many other things, hold person and now pinning arrows and things like that. But the general archer, a druid archer, because they can do so many things. But an archery archer used to be pretty significant, used to be a much more powerful thing. The hardest thing now for me facing an archer is to remember to take the arrow on my chest with Song of Deflection versus taking it on my shield and getting pinned. Making sure it's a pinning arrow and not a phase arrow and things like that. Making sure I have Song of Deflection up. Those sorts of things to keep the effect off of me as well. So with Song of Deflection getting that buff, missiles in general are that much easier, but archers specifically became less of a problem. They still absolutely are a problem because of phase arrow, because if my back's to them, I got to keep my head to them, or things like that, so that I don't take that pinning arrow on the shield, so that I don't take that destruction arrow on the shield, and be out that equipment.
Okay. So something some people don't necessarily realize is that the Bard's songs take up an enchantment slot. Mm-hmm. They are an enchantment that you don and doff pretty quickly. They are dispellable, and they are unlimited. So, has a dispel ever messed with your game plan in any meaningful way?
Not me personally, because I think mostly because my stick's not there anyway. Mm-hmm. Like, if you dispel that's really all I've got. I'm going to wander off until I can get my enchantment back up to protect me. Occasionally, yes. If a druid is quick on the dispel and then fires the arrow or something like that, teamwork druid, somebody's quick on the dispel and then the archer fires the arrow, or the warrior starts to chase me down, whatever it's going to be, the ice ball's coming in at me, whatever the dual threat in whatever way, absolutely can be deadly. But you've got to time it right, and it's rare that the teamwork is there. Only at those higher level sort of kingdom games and things like that will you see that sort of teamwork being there from long practice teams, long-standing battle masters and things like that.
Okay.
Be a little upset at a teammate that was burning a dispel on an opponent bard to get rid of a Song of Deflection, knowing it's just going to come right back or something like that. So I wouldn't want them to burn a dispel on me either. I mean, great if you do. I'll take that. My unlimited versus your one spell point, done. Take a deal all day.
Something that's kind of a wacky situation. As a wizard, I get Dispel Recharge ×3 for free. Mm-hmm. And so there have been a couple of instances where I have dispelled a bard to specifically get away from them. I was in Gift of Air and somebody came up and started doing Song of Battle, and so I went for the dispel, and then they hit me and I became insubstantial because I got the dispel off and then got to return to base. So it's a fringe situation, but it has come in handy for me at least one time.
See that.
So that's just a weird fringe spot that I kind of want to see if other people are doing anything with. And I'm looking for data points. So if anybody's out there watching and you've dispelled a bard for some sort of shenaniganry, please let us know in the comments.
I don't typically run Song of Power, or Song of Battle, rather. Mm-hmm. I don't typically run Song of Battle, so I would not have that experience, but I think that is probably the best use case. Something like that where it would be mission critical right there in the moment. I think it's a great use of it.
Yeah. Are there any enchantments out there that you would take and lose access to your songs? Like, I know that you can get the Druid spell, Essence Graft, that gives you an extra enchantment slot. You can get Essence Graft, but is there a enchantment that's good enough that you would give up the songs to have that enchantment?
Gift of Air is probably the closest. Really depends on what's coming at me on the opposing team. If it's a kingdom scenario where it's a little bit of everything, no, probably not. But if it were a smaller battle game, chapter level battle game, where everything was coming at me was magic, it's a team full of casters, then I might slip into getting a clear pro magic instead of worrying about Song of Survival and Song of Interference and things like that.
Okay.
But it would be rare. Most of the time, I want the adaptability of the songs.
Okay. How can other classes best team up with Bard? I know Bard is really great to have someone else come alongside and play Bard, but is there anything that other people can do to specifically support Bards?
So, yes, but I don't think about it as supporting Bards. It's really what can Bards support for their teammates, and it can get a little bit nutty. It can get a little bit bonkers. One of the best times I've had is amplifying an anti-paladin's terrors and just letting them send their terrors. They get back and whatnot. Like, they're not expecting that.
Real quick, for anyone who's not at home, can you tell them what Amplify does to the terror there?
It extends the terror for someone else. It extends whatever someone else's ability is. Amplify gives someone else an extension.
And that just level of shenaniganry there is delightful.
That was with Ash, so that's my most memorable time. I've done it a few times since then.
That would do it.
Most memorable was with Ash, and I think was at a Bridge Wars as well, 22 maybe.
Okay, cool.
But those sorts of things are what I'm looking for in a teammate. What can I do to support beyond here's a release and here's a mend? So amplifying an insult to get a healer on the back line. Come face my warrior friend Gore here. Things like that. But then what can I do to keep somebody off of my warrior friend? If there's 3 coming at me and I can all 2 of them, then maybe my warrior friend or my monk friend or my whatever friend can handle that one-on-one. Maybe they've got the stick to handle one-on-one but not 3-on-1. So that's where I come in and be an equalizer a little bit and support whatever's coming.
All right. Do you have any specific tactics that you go into these kingdom level games with? Things that you know you're going to do?
It really is game dependent. If I know it's going to be a faster paced game, I'm going to take a little less battery and support and a little bit more aggressive crowd control focused. If it's going to be maybe a slower paced, long Guild Wars sort of event games, then I'll take a little bit more battery stuff to make sure my healers are replenished. I'll take my Song of Power to pop it up, let people do their charging, especially if I can get 3 or 4 people around me charging at one time. It makes that a little bit worth it, and then I can bring it back down for my Song of Deflection and move up to a midline or a front line, as the case is. But that's the big thing about Bard, is you have to be adaptable to any situation. You have to be prepared for, oh crap, this is not where I parked my car, I need to get out of here, or oh crap, that point is being taken, I need to get those people off that point now, and shove and agoraphobia and awe and things like that.
Okay. How do you choose your targets for your spells? Are they mostly opportunistic, or do you scout the enemy team and pre-select? How are you choosing where you're going to spend your magic?
So initially, I'm looking at the other team and doing threat assessment. Obviously, yes, it's opportunistic. If the major threat that I need to be dealing with isn't coming into my area, they're staying on the other side of the field for whatever reason, then yes, I'm going to take my targets of opportunity. Otherwise, I'm going to try to get close to them to do whatever I'm trying to do to them. Get them with an agoraphobia or get them with something, depending on what the case may be. It's less about class and more about player for me. We'll talk about a little bit more later on when we talk about Paragons in general and future Paragon Bards, but really it's more about player and less about class. If it's players I've not faced before, new players or new to Kingdom and things like that, or that I haven't fought with as much before, then I have to rely on what class information I have and things like that. But ultimately, as much as I can, I look for, is that player a threat regardless of class, and then I go from there.
Okay, cool. Going to those Paragon questions, What advice would you give someone who's starting out as someone who wants to be a Paragon Bard? If they're level 6 and they want to take it to the next level, or maybe even if they're just starting out at the very beginning, level 1 Bard, what advice would you give that person?
Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Really, Bard has a ton of abilities, has I don't know, 40 spells or 35 spells or whatever it is. Pick 4. Maximize those 4. Practice those 4. Get those 4 down cold. Second nature, get the muscle memory, get the speech memory, really get it flowing, and learn people's names. The hardest thing about casting is having to go, hey, warrior in black, or hey, bard in blue, or whatever the case may be. That extends your casting time by just enough that it gives people enough of a reaction. They can do a little bit more about it. So learn people's names and work on focusing on just those first 4 abilities, whatever you decide they are for you, whatever fits your play style.
Okay. Stepping out of Bard a little bit and going into a more general, what is a Paragon?
A Paragon is someone I am worried about regardless of... I shouldn't say regardless. When I look across the field and I see classes, and I'm not worried about classes. Oh, there's a wizard. This is what I want to do when I encounter this person on the field. Mm-hmm. If I think about it in terms of a wizard, then we're not talking about paragons. But if I think about it in terms of this particular person as a wizard, that person is probably a paragon or a near paragon or should be a paragon or things like that. If I look across the field and I see Wizard Bob, then I need to know how to handle Wizard Bob. But handling Wizard Bob is a lot different from handling Paragon Wizard Artie. Mm-hmm. And I need to make sure I account for that level of talent. And that's really what that kind of thing boils down to, is does the person make a difference independent of their class because of their class? Am I looking at just a wizard or just a barbarian, or am I looking at Bob as the wizard or Bob as the barbarian?
Okay. Cool. What's something that you look for in a potential paragon? What's something that maybe not right now, but you look at that person, you say, I can see that this person will eventually get to that skill level?
I look for, can they handle the situations and adapt to the situations that they see on the battlefield? Can they adapt to this class is coming at them? How do they handle it? And that doesn't mean necessarily killing the class that's coming at them or winning the encounter, but that means at least surviving, not freezing up, and things like that. Can they handle, do they know what they're going to do when a wizard comes running at them, ambulant, something. Are they making good choices? If they're running after that wizard with heat weapon and that wizard is casting back verbally at them, the wizard weapon's probably not the factor you need to be working on. You need to be looking at its icy blast or something like that. So that's the kind of thing across all classes. Are they using their class? Are they using their threat assessment to make good decisions, to at least survive the encounter and live to fight another day?
Okay. So something that Paragons are able to do, Paragons are able to take apprentices. Do you have any apprentices currently, and are you on the lookout for an apprentice?
I do not have any currently, and I'm not particularly on the lookout. It's not that I would say no necessarily. It's that I don't know that there is necessarily value in it for everyone. I did not have an apprentice myself. I was not squired to a knight or anything like that. I'm very pig-headed as a personality, so it's not necessarily for me. if the personality, if the person wants such a thing, if somebody is out there looking, I absolutely would not say no, just on spec. But it really's got to suit what your goals are and what you're looking for to develop out of any sort of mentorship or anything like that. Mentorship is valuable. It's a proven tactic for learning and education and training and practice. But I don't know that it's super necessary for what we're doing here.
Okay. Cool. Well, obviously, you've been in a bunch of Kingdom offices around at different points in time. So I assume the answer to this last question is going to be yeah, but are you okay with people coming up and asking you Bard questions or questions in general at events?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is 100% what I'm here for.
Cool. Do you have any final thoughts or advice for all the bards out there before we go?
Slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Awesome. Well, thank you to Paragon Bard Milk for coming on the show tonight. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more awesome Amtgard battle gaming content. And if you have any questions for Milk, please leave them down in the comments. And thank you for watching all the way to the end of the video. We'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for having me.